Camera's on. Okay. Pete and Phil. Cal and Phil. Phil and Cal. Well, good evening. My name is Stan Moore. I work with Michigan State University as well, with Phil Kaatz and Phil Durst there in the back, and pleasure to be with you guys. I'm glad that you guys could be out, because one of the things as we were talking about putting these presentations together is hoping to have some interaction with those of you that are here. So glad you're able to come out and meet with us. I do want to say, as we move into this discussion about lean management and feed shrink, so it's going to tie very well into the talk that Phil just gave, is I want to make sure we give credit to those on the team that we really do at MSU work as a team in the dairy industry. There's about 7 of us that work closely with dairy producers, as well as a number of others that bring in some environmental expertise to the team as well. We have some other subsidiaries there, if you will. So Phil Durst contributed to this, Martin Menguel, some other educators. I assume you'll give credit partway through to Don as well. So, but I want to start a little bit about talking about lean management concepts and how we really think that ties in well to forage shrink on farms. So how many have heard of lean management to some degree? Okay, kind of the old Toyota model. So this is built out of Toyota, where they really looked at, let's concentrate on what adds value. Let's look at that value chain all the way back and say, okay, let's eliminate all waste that doesn't give value to the end product. Okay, we're going to really zone in on trying to get rid of waste in the system. And then when we come all the way back around, so we're going to create flow, we're going to establish pull from the customer side, kind of getting to that just-in-time inventory. We're not going to carry a bunch of other stuff. And we really need to be concerned about continuous improvement. So there's obviously some things in here that they concentrated more on. These are kind of 3 topics where they spent a lot of time within Toyota looking at delivering value to your customer, eliminating that waste, as I mentioned, and continuous improvement. They spent a lot of effort on that. And I think that ties well into things that we would look at on a dairy farm, or really any farm, to say, where can we make improvements? And sometimes as farmers we get tired of, get more efficient, cut. But what we're really talking about here is best use of resources, as well as where is their waste on the farm. So, and we really can't afford not to be improving. Phil mentioned the 1% to 2% a year. And I think, we've all witnessed pretty good farms go out of business, but they were at that same level maybe for a number of years, and maybe there were some critical steps. There's always cases where they, just come into the industry at the wrong time, or, buy land at the wrong time or whatever, but we do have to be continuously improving. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But we really think that those concepts, those same lean management concepts, can really be applied to every dairy farm, whether it's here in Israel or back in the U.S. Okay, and that if you do that, we can make a real impact on both productivity and profitability on the farm. But when we're talking about lean management, one of the really important critical things is that it really does require all hands on deck from everybody on the farm. You can't just kind of dictate this from management. You can't have just part of the employees doing it. It really does need to be everybody involved in the process, and employees become a really critical component of it, because they're hands-on. They're seeing where they have probably one of the best eyes for where waste is taking place. Okay, because they're right there, and maybe some great ideas on how to solve it as well. Okay, so they need to be involved in the process. So, well, what can we do to reduce waste? If you look at the farm, you start looking at issues of where is time being wasted. As an employee having to, Phil and I did some research on employee management on farms, and we got input from employees across 12 farms, multiple states in the U.S. 176 employees gave us feedback. And I remember one of the things was somebody being really frustrated with, just where's that tool? I spend hours each day looking for the tool that was supposed to be there. So those types of things that waste our time, Obviously wasted resources. What are unproductive assets on the farm? I know, I think it may have even just been coming over from the airport. I remember somebody in our group saying the old barn that should have been gone a long time ago. Does anybody want to confess to it? Because I've heard that from a farm in Michigan as well, that said that farm is costing us, that barn is costing us tons of money. We pull cows out of there, we put them in another barn, production goes up tremendously. But Dad says, you know how much that barn that has made us money over the years, that we're not moving out of that barn. And so, it's those types of things that we look for that could be really contributing to waste. So some things that we can look at in all of the areas that Phil and I are going to cover today is areas that, resources that we lose quality and quantity of our forages can be impacted by this. The things that we're spending more labor on than we need to. We had a farm on a totally different area look at their parlor setup and say, okay, let's just take all the employees out. This is a rotary system, and rethink this whole thing. And where can I plug in just from a blank slate to make this thing work better and save labor? How much time we're wasting, and then obviously some accuracy things that we can do to make it better. Well, I didn't know that animation was going to do there. We talked about that flow cycle, and so from a feed standpoint, we start up here with harvest, and there's really opportunity for waste all along this cycle, right? So in the delivering process, what's happening there could be weather, could be, lots of wind, could be improperly, well, I don't want to get into too much of our individual stuff, but there's lots of opportunity for waste there. There's opportunity for waste in storage. When we go to move to the mixing area, in the mixing area, moving it to the feed bunk and in the feed bunk. So that's kind of the cycle that we're going to cover. We're going to stop short of the feed bunk here today. So really looking at those management areas. So I said the second thing besides the waste is the root cause analysis. So this is where we really look at why something is taking place. So really, instead of treating the symptoms, it's easy to cast blame, to look at, okay, this particular situation, why did that employee do that dumb thing? But we really need to, with root cause analysis, just continue to ask the why question until we get down to what's really causing the issue. And get it to a point where we can actually take action. So although it may make us feel good to assign blame, that only lasts for that momentary period, because when you walk away, you really haven't solved the problem, until you get down to that root cause. Obviously, we ask questions like when, where, and how, but why is the big one? So just as an example, this is a video that Don Martell shared with us of Diamond V, and you ask yourself why. Why would you get into the situation?
Saves the mix.
Where's the driver?
Well, maybe adding just a little bit more. Maybe that'll take care of it.
All
right. The scale still hasn't hit the right spot apparently, because he's obviously looking at the scale the way he's jiggling the bucket, right? Okay. You've never seen this.
That's a classic.
You've never seen that here, right?
Okay.
So what do you think? What are some of the issues there? What would you look at?
You should have just pushed the bucket down to 4.
Oh, there you go. Get the weight and then quick back up and you're done, right?
The good ones know you shut the PTO off so it doesn't fall out anymore.
Uh-huh.
Keep it up. You run into the barn and run some out and then stop.
And then mix the rest of it. So you've met your little, and one of the things that the employee may be dealing with is if this farm is doing a good job of tracking variance from what weights are, they want to get it right. But something's obviously gone wrong here. If it's happening all the time, you start talking about size of batch and equipment. Maybe the forage has changed a lot in dry matter. And so now you've got a lot more volume there. That seems to maybe not answer all this question because he's trying to put a whole nother bucket on there. But really asking the questions to get to what's really going on there. So, well, why would we not address it? You know, what can you see that holds dairymen or other farmers back from addressing this kind of situation?
Is your father doing it?
Okay. Oh, Phil and I were at a farm meeting. We did these meetings on farm with small groups from employers talking about employee management, and the one would just give his dad the leash. I mean, Dad could do whatever he wanted, and then he had to come and clean up, you know, after the employees, humped up in the corner from Dad, you know, getting after him. So yeah, what else? What else causes us not to deal with shrink? Not aware. Haven't quantified it, right? So we don't know the real cost of it.
Maybe you don't want to deal with the workers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Some people just call it the cost of doing business. Out of sight, out of mind. Not worth my time to worry about. Okay. Lack of awareness and information. You can't really measure what you can't. Can't really manage what you can't measure. But we really believe there is potential profit there. So really recognizing that cost. So Phil is going to take us through a little bit about net farm profitability, some examples of shrink, and then I'm going to come back up and try to make this as seamless as possible.
Okay.
You got a nice pocket to just drop it into.
You're right. All right, so when we have a group of educators that do an annual assessment of farms across the state, and on those farms, they measure profitability. This is just one of the indicators when they measure those profitability factors, and they come up with net farm income dollars per year. It's a very detailed assessment that these farm management educators go through with producers like yourselves. Stan has done a number of these. We have a total different group besides our dairy team that does this. And as you can see from year to year to year to year, every year there's always some winners and some losers. So what are the differences?
Before you leave that, for dairy, this is about 300,000 in between these. It's fairly eerie. Other than, and in fact, even with crops here, if you look down through there,
Yeah.
220, 230 is capturing most years, right, between differences in net farm income.
And that's not between the highest and the lowest farms. That's between the highest
It's
25%, the average of them, and the average of the lowest 25%.
Right.
So the
The range
range,
is much bigger
the
than
range
yes.
is incredible.
Like they said, if you look at, there's groups. You've got the very good farms, the high 25%. What happens to them on a regular basis? They make money year in and year out. Rarely do they lose money on any given year, even with weather extremes, even with cropping extremes. Price swings with commodities or whatever their feedstuffs are. This is for cash grain, but like Stan and Phil said, it is for every type of enterprise. Then you have the low 25%. These are the farms that just never seem to get over the hump. I mean, they lose money every year, practically.
What did you say today, Glenn?
Unfortunately, I think there's dairy farmers who are out of business and don't know they're out of business.
Yeah, without even knowing it. They're pulling all of the things that they've accumulated during their lifetime out of the farm, burning equity every year, and don't even know it. But look at these numbers. The average for all farms was $74,000, an average of minus $50,000 per year. Wow. Versus the farms in the high 25%, they made $170,000 per year. It doesn't matter what the size of the farm is. It doesn't matter the number of cows that you milk. Good management travels. And it's good in Israel, it's good in New York, it's good in Michigan, it's good everywhere. You can't buy that kind of management expertise. Sometimes it's learned, sometimes it's value that comes from listening to others that have ideas that you can learn from, but you've got to implement it. You must put it to work on your farm in order to make it work for you. So now we're going to talk about shrink on a farm and just how important that is. The difference between what's harvested and what the cows consume. And there's a big range of that number. Here are the places in the field. I talked about saving the leaves. Leaves have rights too. This is where we get to that. In the storage, at the bunk, too much rainwater going into the silage. During feed out, what happens if things get hot and you have actually dry matter being burned up right in the feed bunk? Refusal, they sort, they tend to leave what they don't like, eat what they do like, and what happens with milk production? It follows the same pattern. So those are all places where feed shrink is very important. Dr. Keith Bolson out of Kansas State University, he figures the average shrink is 20% on farms. Wow. 1% per year. Think about that, 1% per year. In 20 years, where are you? Okay, that's why this is so critical.
Bolson was here several times.
He's very good, isn't he?
He was very much impressed of Israeli silage.
He's a good man. I know Keith, and he knows his stuff. Reducing shrink on forages and purchased commodities can have a big impact. We saw that on the financial analysis. It can free up acres that can be used for other feeds to expand your herd. We had this conversation. Maybe it was Cal. 20 acres, not even have to use it anymore, and can be used for something else. This is achievable. It can be done. If you look at the production in land due to annual corn shrink, the amount of shrink, okay, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35%, the extra tons per year, extra hectares per year, look at those numbers. Those add up pretty fast. 200 cows fed 13 kilograms of silage per day per hectare, per day hectares, based on 45 tons per hectare. Those are big numbers that add up. And if we can be at 20%, look at the difference between here to here. And there are farms that are here today for a while. They won't be long and they'll be out of business. Or they were gone last year. So when I talk about the bottlenecks that we had in the last presentation for alfalfa, field curing, we figure that there's 10% that can be lost in field curing, 8% during harvest, 5% during storage, and 8% during feed out. Those are big numbers as well. And these are numbers where we can concentrate on trying to do a better job, get that low-hanging fruit that's out there, and try and reduce things that we can see and really control versus things that are out of our control. As an average, this is based on several years of data. In Michigan, we can get 15 wet tons on a four-cut system of alfalfa haylage. If you take 10%, that's 1.6 tons in field curing of dry matter loss, 1.13 in harvest loss, two-thirds of a ton in storage loss, and almost a full ton in feeding loss. Now you're looking at, wow, okay, going from 15 tons to 11.4 tons, and it raises our cost of production dramatically. Things that we don't even realize, we go from, and I don't have the price in here of what it was before, but you have to figure those are going to be in our actual cost of production, irregardless of how much fertilizer we put on, seed we use, all the things associated with our costs. If you use corn silage, and there is a difference between corn on corn and corn on alfalfa. I talked about it earlier. What is the difference? Nitrogen. And the ability to get, instead of 21 tons, we're getting how much? We're actually increasing our tonnages by doing that. And there's data out of Wisconsin to justify this. But look at those losses. If we do the same on our corn silage, now instead of at 23 tons, we're at 19 tons per acre. 17.8 or 0.5 tons per acre. It drives our cost of production up dramatically. This was done in, I put this together in 2018 when the price of corn was higher than it is today. Harvesting the proper moisture. This is, I put this in here, but it should be something that you've memorized or should have known. If you have this kind of silo, horizontal trench, your moisture goal should be 60 to 75%. Dry matter 30 to 35%. In bags or an upright silo, but mostly our bunker silos that we see today, we should be in that range all the time for our moisture levels. And why is that? Reducing shrink, dry matter loss, it can happen. I look at him shooting that corn silage over another wagon into this wagon, and I'm thinking to myself, he better be really good. Because how many times have I been in a chopper with a farmer and seen it flow out the back, over the side, over the other side, on the top. They've always got a whole ridge on the top of the cab that's full of corn silage that never gets harvested.
When a farmer invites you to come see the harvest, you just follow the grains on the road. You know?
Yes,
You just follow
I've seen it blow out on the road. Absolutely,
the
yes.
highway.
So is it 5% for corn silage? Who knows? It's hard to quantify it. I rode in a chopper today, or not today, this past year, and I said to the farmer, this has got a lot of technology, and he said, oh, it's the biggest and best, brightest, and it actually has GPS where it follows the wagon and the truck next to him. We have semis that drive next to the chopper. The cost on that chopper was only $900,000. And he still had corn silage going over the side. But we talked about this earlier, matching the size of the machinery with your harvest. I took a trip to Ukraine, and they had huge machinery, itty-bitty little trench silos, and they never matched the capacity of the harvest to the storage. It was always off. They were always waiting on one end or the other. So match your machinery to your harvest capabilities or your packing capabilities, like Owen talked about earlier today. Avoid leaching. Why is leachate so critical? It does bad things to water, and water is a huge concern for Michigan. We have the most water in our nation, with 4 lakes that surround Michigan, all fresh water. Our lakes are like oceans. They have waves 30 feet tall. Yeah, they're big, okay? But we want to improve packing, fermentation, and digestibility. Harvest, spread, and pack quickly. Pack, 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 pack. Never underestimate packing and why that's so critical. Now, one of the things that I want to make sure that you understand is that corn processing has taken dramatic increases in the corn today as far as digestibility. Most farms, pay attention to this, but I don't know that they do an excellent job. There is actually an app available for farmers today on your smartphones where you can look at the processing of the corn being taken out of the field. It's called Silage Snap. and it's based out of University of Wisconsin, and they will actually measure the corn that's left intact and tell you whether or not you're processing enough or not. Look at these numbers. 97 to 322, the average as far as processing was 61.8. The optimum percent of producers hitting the mark was 1/4 of everyone. Less than 1/4 were actually processing adequately or optimally. 9% were very poor. Where does that leave the rest of them? Somewhere in between, right? So I'm going to say that the average could be better. Who was the person responsible for determining where the processing is done correctly or incorrectly? Who pays attention to that per load, per day, per hour, if you want to call it that? Because we have producers that are custom silage harvesters. They harvest corn silage for a dairy producer day in and day out. Their goal is to harvest as much forage as possible, as quickly as possible, so that he can get paid as much as possible. Is it his advantage to process that corn? Nope. That is a real good answer, because the more horsepower you use to process, the slower you go. So it's kind of those win-lose situations. So it's important. This is the average. Out of all of these producers, talking about packing earlier, shred leach was one of those technologies that we looked at in the Midwest, and it caused some problems with machinery. It tore apart the choppers. It really did. And if we look at the average, there's a lot of them that had better than average, below average, but we want to make sure that we're packing and being up in this range where we can have the most packing density possible. This is what a good bunker silo looks like. Excellent operator. They sold their cows this past year. Not because they had to. He retired. Okay? There is a difference. Yeah. But look at the face. It is straight as an arrow. Look at the top. Wow. He used oxygen barrier covering. If you're not using it, you should be. Air and water are our enemy. Water along the sides will cause problems with corn silage. Here they are, they're putting the tires on the bunker. That is such a beautiful job for someone else. I noticed that you use full tires here in
Full tires.
full tires.
Some use that, but where I live, for instance, we have to use full tires because it's so windy.
So windy.
Very windy,
Right.
and these things wouldn't be good enough.
We don't use
And
tires anymore.
It's
illegal
some-
today because
Most
of the
don't,
environment
most
issues.
don't.
Yeah, because the
You have
environmental
mosquitoes
issues, they use
inside.
Most no longer use tires.
That's why these are cut in half. No water lays on that.
We use like paper leftovers, like
They're like 25 pounds
it's
a piece.
pure NDF, and they covered the nylon with it. Over.
I took a picture at someone's farm today of a mesh over the top of plastic.
Yeah, that's it.
That's
That's
it.
pretty.
That's it? That's normal?
We don't need to do
Yeah,
that.
like a 10 centimeter layer of a mesh over the nylon.
Didn't see that. I did not see that.
It works amazing. And
These are very good silage producers. They do the job that needs to be done. They cover it as quickly as possible and reduce the amount. I like to see that plastic go underneath the corn silage or the haylage. And the reason why is because as the water runs down the side of the bunker silo and comes out the end here, it should be sloped a little bit. It doesn't absorb the moisture as it goes through. Thermal imaging has been done on a lot of times, and I'm sure if Keith Bolson has been here, you've seen this kind of information that shows what happens when you break apart that corn that silage pile. Air is our enemy. It really is. And these are percentages that we can see on flat storage bins, specialty mixers, corn silage, haylage, baled hay. Too high to very good. Again, these are from Kansas State information. What's wrong with that picture?
Is that the spoilage pile?
No? This is good silage. This is probably the width of my hand on the top that's spoiled. Where's the covering? There wasn't any, okay? That was just a poor job.
Just a pile of chopped.
Part of that low 25%. Compare that to this man. That is a beautiful bunk silo. There is no spoilage that I could see on that silo.
How did he get this high?
How did he?
With the cold
The machinery of the
They push with a tractor and a blade.
Oh, a telehandler with a boom that goes.
Oh, I'll show you the machine that they used to take this off. This is the haylage on the same farm. He cuts it out. It's beautiful. It's the best I've seen. This is from Michigan, and when he cuts that, that's the machine that he uses to cut it. There are the blades that are razor sharp.
Is that a European tool?
It sure is a European tool. Yep. He's from Ireland and made sure that he brought that with him when he came to the U.S. That's
wide? How tall are you?
6 foot. It's as big as I was.
So it can like go deep in the silage when you cut.
It's probably this wide.
About a meter.
Yeah,
About a
that's about right. About a meter. So that's the way it can be. And when we look at typical feed losses, is this where you start, Stan? No? Okay.
You're good for a couple more.
All right. This is percent shrink that we can see typically. And again, we're looking at moving in and out. So it includes the transportation back and forth. Dry commodities, wet modified distillers grains, wet brewers, high moisture corn. You don't have high moisture corn in Israel, do you?
Doesn't exist.
All dry corn. Okay.
I've never seen it.
We do in Michigan. Soybean meal, modified distillers grains, those are pretty good sized ranges. Those are typical shrink numbers. And what happens when you have open-sided versus upright bins? Look, managing less than 2%, managing a 5%. Overhangs need to be correct. High inclusion rates are blends with high levels of liquid fat or some type of liquid fat to stabilize your forages and your not your forages, but your high value products. Backwall spoilage. This is you? All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Stan.
And if you go back to when we were at the feed center today, you know, it became obvious that one of the things that you guys, and it was even mentioned here earlier about wind, I'm sure wind is an issue for feed loss. It's goats?
Birds.
Oh, birds. Yes, yes. Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many shoots.
They still come back of the dust, you know, being blown as you're trying to load it, and you know, some of that you just can't get away from. That feed center was very well run, but that's, you know, obviously an area of concern. So the last area we wanted to talk about was in the feed out standpoint. I think this is probably really critical here as well, because especially in the wintertime when you're getting lots of rain, you know. So if we knew that we were going to get a lot of rain tonight, and the normal practice was to pull some feed off and have it ready for the guy to feed up early in the morning. You know, do your employees know that maybe they should hold off and start earlier the next morning rather than pulling all of this down? But this certainly probably exceeds what they may have needed there to have ready for the next feeding anyway. So just really trying to keep away from those heat up periods, as Phil clearly showed on the face of that bunk, how hot that face can get and how much dry matter we can lose in that case. So
If, even with our rakes and our cutters, just by separating that
Yeah.
silage just a little bit, allowing air to get in, it can go in 6 to 8 feet
Yeah.
very quickly.
yeah,
And that will cause areas of Clostridium problems, molds, bacterias. It's havoc.
yeah, and I don't want to sound negative at all about the rake thing that we saw today, but that's why guys in Michigan have went to things like this, where they can try to avoid any pulling of that front face of that pile apart. You know, anytime we start to really pull on that pile with a rake type mechanism, we open it up for heat up.
Me and my brother butt heads on this, but what's the best way to monitor your dry matter daily? Like in the morning, we want to go. Like
Yeah.
we want to feed fast, but we shouldn't pick up more. Like our bunk looks similar to that, but then they deface and they're moving. You know, they're moving tons and tons of feed, and it might be raining. Are we picking up, are we losing dry, like, is our dry matter changing much if the bunk looks like this when they start? Should our dry matter be flat day to day?
Yeah,
There's
as far
bunk-
as
I mean, there's bunk
yeah.
variation.
Yeah, right. Yeah, unless you've got a really heavy rain. I mean, that's one of the advantages of the bunker silos is you are going across, you know, a range of dry matter within that silo. So the average should be taken out some, but we still should be testing. Are you checking like all the time? Is it, you gotta?
Every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Do you advise people to do it every day?
Yeah, I mean, Martina just did some work this last summer, and I think he's talking about 3 days now as a, not necessarily, yeah, 3 times.
Dry matters on forages 3 times a week. You've seen variation even in that period of time.
Now, obviously, what you do with that is critical too. You know, do you have to adjust every time you have a small change? If you're doing it yourself, you can make more timely adjustments, obviously, than if you're sending it off to have it tested. But
See, in order to get going in the morning, are you pulling down feed at night for the next morning?
No.
okay,
But one guy pulls the feed down, another guy moves it around, like to the feed center.
Okay.
And we have, the farms are a mile apart, so we're doing feed at both farms
Right.
at the same time, and then one guy's doing the mixing. But, like, when my father did it, he could do 30 mixes, and, there's some things, but he just remember how many payloader buckets.
yeah,
So if you had a foot of snow and you came out
Right.
and it was snowing while you
Right.
do it,
right,
we'd actually get a pretty consistent mix. But the guy now, it's like he's just gonna feed whatever the computer says. And if you're breathing water, it's raining so hard, the cows are gonna be able to feed that night.
yeah. But we are pushing to check more often,
Do the
and then
buckets
making
with-
adjustments.
The buckets with the dry matter sensor in them, are they good? Are they a waste of money?
I haven't had as much experience because my farms are smaller.
We had a couple bigger guys try that, and we pulled them all out. It was causing, we were empty way more than when we were.
Yeah.
You can't take a real
Yeah.
sensitive piece of equipment like that, throw it in front of the
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just think it would be limited.
Yeah.
on
Good point.
How accurate it would be from day to day.
Yeah. Yeah, with anything, that's a good point. With anything sensitive to that, how often are you calibrating it to actually, make sure that it's working?
Depending on if it's sat out in the heat, direct sunlight affects it because it's NIR.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get light intrusion.
How are you checking dry matters?
They have a Koster tester.
Okay.
I like the microwave, I think it's quicker, but it might not be as accurate.
Yeah,
Depends on if
yeah,
it's your wife's or not.
Yeah.
yeah.
I just use, I use her other kitchen appliances or
yeah.
farm, but.
Yeah, you can get a microwave for the farm, but yeah, I like the Coster tester still, but it does take a while.
Probably we should take the USB card away from the feed mixer, and my brother should just adjust moistures in the morning.
I've gone to using a Forage Tester that takes about 10 minutes to run a test.
What brand is that?
I made it. And it's based off the Penn State Forage Vortex dryer, a PVC pipe, and a hair dryer. As long as it's, and I used a hair dryer, and it's got a hot setting and a cooler setting. In 10 minutes, it was fully dry. And it was 1 pound sample.
So it's a modified Coster tester.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
But it was fast, a lot faster than a Coster tester.
yeah.
And it's, you don't want to put it at a very hot level if you're going to test feed quality for it. But if you're just testing dry matters, shoot it in there. Let it go.
Yeah, I want the blueprints for that.
We lost
The
a
fatty acids won't
taking
go
a sample.
evaporate.
Hold on a second.
The fatty acids in the silage.
We're not testing for quality, we're testing for dry matter.
Yeah, that's all we're
That's
doing.
all.
That's all, yeah.
If we want to
It's
test
just
for
quick and
quality,
dirty, yeah.
150 degrees or less. But if we're testing just for dry matter, turn it up and let it go. I've never burned anything, so it's pretty good.
Yeah. Glenn?
Just safety issue. When
Yeah.
these guys are thinking of you guys pulling samples
Yeah.
and stuff. We
Yeah.
lost a vet in Michigan a year ago. The pile came down and killed him. So
Yeah.
that happens.
Yeah, we've lost several people across the U.S. I thought
I was
maybe
nervous at the
you would
pile
even,
today.
yeah,
When we were standing at that silage pile, I was nervous because even though Cal could reach the top, I couldn't. Cal, he's 6'6", okay? But avalanches happen in a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Just right now.
yeah.
Well, the problem is, you guys ask how do you deface that? When you deface up there and you still got 4 foot.
Yeah.
And you guys see that, don't you?
Yes.
People stacking,
Conversations about, because the other thing you get in trouble is then they start pushing to try to get that last little bit, and it causes a fracture. When you cut back plastic aggressively and get water in there,
yeah.
I think it's appropriately addressed.
Yeah, yeah, so, I mean, the recommendation is that you're staying back a good distance from this face, like 3 to 1. I don't know a lot of guys that'll go 3 to 1, but even if you just go back, you know, a ways to do that,
Take a density on that.
Right.
Or if you're trying to take a sample on that, you're not 3 to 1, you're right up against it.
well, but you should, yeah, so doing feed sampling, we can handle that. We can get, you know, we can bring down silage, we can mix it a little bit at the face of the pile, we can bring it back with our skid steer and do the sampling away from the pile. So there's no reason why we can't do that, okay? So 3 to 1's the recommendation.
What is that pile?
To
Like
stay.
120 wide and like 16 high?
It's Phil's picture. Where are you at here?
1,
It's
2,
more than
3,
16 feet
4,
high.
5, 6, 7 buckets high. And
Times 4?
It was probably this tall, that bucket thing.
A good 3 feet.
It's like 36 feet.
Yeah, it's 30 feet.
30 feet. That's
Yeah.
like a 3,000 cal corn pile.
I mean, and we recommend the buddy, you know, we recommend not having one person go when you're doing sampling and that type of thing. You know, there should be 2 people. Somebody visible there. Are you going to dig the person out by yourself? You know, probably not, but you can call in and you can get the process started, hopefully. But you get underneath a pile like that, there's not much chance of getting you back out. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah, staying away from those piles. And it really, even,
Anyway, I understand, I think about it, but I don't think I've ever heard of a system.
oh yeah, we've had it happen. And this one, obviously, it's less likely to happen because it's not overcut, but I still wouldn't be up there doing a lot of work around that face of that
I
pile.
wouldn't be standing underneath that pile.
Yeah,
and the other thing you have to be aware of is if you have a seam, the old crop, the new crop, those are all gonna collapse. And making sure
Right.
people understand that, stay back and away from it.
yeah. Good point. You don't know where that seam is when you're necessarily pulling that. pulling that out. That goes for pulling that plastic back off the top too. So let's go forward a little bit. Did that cover it, Glenn, to your? It's an issue.
Safety is critical for employees and owners as well, and all those service people that work on our farms, whether they're nutritionists or whether they're veterinarians, safety is really important. Farms can be dangerous places. Just don't lose sight of that.
Yeah. Shameless plug for our Farm Employee University. So we've recently developed as a dairy team a online training course for employees, and there is a safety section in that, and starring Phil around the silage pile, and myself in the parlor. We also have sections on milking, on animal handling, and on calf care. So, yeah, in skid steer. So it's free to enroll your employees in that. So encourage you to do that. I can give you the information. I'll put it on a slide tomorrow, or 2 days from now in the calf program. All right, got to move along here. Loading and filling, we looked at the overfilling of the loader bucket. You can also underfill them. Scales need to be checked and calibrated. Guessing at weights usually doesn't work too well on buckets. You do, get a feel for it. Some of those dads, we saw this one going, but we can get under. We can underfill too. And what kind of problems does that cause? You guys know? Especially.
A lot of sorting.
Yeah. So, especially depending on your order of adding material, you've got some nice fines up there on top. Obviously doing some of the ingredient mixing that we saw at the feed center today helps, but you still have to have your batch sized right for your mixer to make sure that you're getting stuff mixed up. So all three of those are pretty much the same. But you can just see it sitting on top there. Yep. You can get issues too with wear, obviously, on these, that you're expecting it to be able to pull off the bottom and bring it up. And if you've got your blades worn at the bottom where you can get your hand underneath them, you're going to have some fines sitting there at the bottom. So constant maintenance is important, okay? Obviously, operator accuracy. Pete was getting to this in a different way, but, if we're tracking these things and things are happening, I was looking at the days on this, and it's almost every other week. I don't know if that's weekend when Dad comes and does the thing, or the fill-in employee, or something's happening, but it seems to be on a fairly regular basis. We've got a big issue with error happening on the farm. So how many are tracking error numbers for their, or you guys know producers that are doing it here?
I think most of the big ones
keep pretty tight.
Like automatically.
Okay.
The ration software.
Feeding it back in.
Through the operator and backwards, then you see like real time, not real time, but every day you can see
Right.
the accuracy. But
Right.
I think it's also a thing of awareness, because today the farmer was, before I came here, I saw one of the feeding bunks with really high, like unmixed, ration, and like this hay was very long, unchopped, and then another group with like very good and mixed, and I started to go off with my special thing on the manager. I thought, you should talk to operator, and if there is you should look, say, it was me. The farm manager, it's his farm, said it was me. I told him, what happened? He said, I used on this group, I used wet hay, and I used on this group dry hay. So I told him, you have to be aware, because he used the same time, chopping time. He says, okay, chop 7 minutes chop time, and then mixing another 5 minutes, and then, so if you use different feeds, even through the day, you have to be aware, because this is bad. It makes salting and refusals, and
Sure.
so it's also looking not what's coming in, but also what's coming out.
What's ending up in front of the cow. Yeah. I think we've talked about that. You can design a forage.
Look in the wrong place for the answer to that. Too often we would say, something's wrong with the ration, we need to increase something because our milk went down, when the reality was, it was not a problem necessarily with the ration, it was a problem with the delivery.
It's always the nutritionist's fault.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the same.
It's always the nutritionist. It goes to farm. It's you. It's always you.
So we used to have this professor on campus at MSU named Herb Buchholz. Herb was my major professor when I was getting my master's. And his thing that he said he always did as a nutrition guy going out is he would take donuts to the feed man on the farm, the guy that was mixing the feed. Because he said I could work with the farmer or the nutritionist all I wanted, but if that guy screwed up and didn't follow it, it didn't matter.
That's the best advice I've heard.
So take donuts or whatever pastries you like.
Do we have that in the slide? Take
No,
donuts?
take donuts, no. So, all right. Through in this, there's obviously some things beyond, and you guys just said birds, huge impacts, that these things can have on our farm. Fly control. We saw this in calves on a farm that we were out to. That was just the amount of flies on the feed was incredible. That they were not only consuming themselves, but keeping the calves from really wanting to consume. Okay, so all those things can have a major impact too. So we touched on this earlier, but that last key to lean management that we were going to talk about is just the continuous improvement thing, that we need to keep an eye on this. Keep looking for opportunities. You can't stress that enough, that we need to make those 1% to 2% improvements every year. You want to say something?
Yeah, Stan, that silage pile, the very excellent silage pile that we've seen, that producer told me, I look for low-hanging fruit every day.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that said that to me, and I said, what happens when you run out of low-hanging fruit? He says, I'm still looking for that day. He doesn't run out of things to look at, and so if somebody that's doing that kind of job is still looking, boy, that leaves a lot of room for improvement for all the rest of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really does.
Making that a part of I put management team meetings up there, but even employee meetings, making that a regular part of that discussion. A lot of our farmers hate to have employee meetings because they end up being complaint sessions, and I'm like, well, that's because you need to take care of that before the meeting. It should never be waiting until the meeting happens, but they really should be about what can we do differently to continuously improve what's going out on the farm. We've got some farms that are doing a great job bringing outside individuals in as well. And we heard New York is doing that. They actually get some funding from the state to help with that. Pennsylvania gets some funding from the state to do that. But we've got farms in Michigan that regularly look at bringing in outside individuals to give them another eye. So, that typically is the nutritionist, the veterinarian, maybe somebody from extension, maybe somebody from finance, farm credit, whatever finance you're using, because it might be a good idea for them to know what's going on in the farm. So.
Get your banker dirty.
Yes, yep. Well, I won't go into had some bad experiences with them not knowing. So I think bringing them in and giving them as much knowledge of what dairy farming is a good idea. Because they are lending the money to you. So we've talked about a lot of things here, but there's certainly lots of opportunities to lower shrink on our farms, whether it's commodities and high ingredients. And I really appreciated the premix that we saw today and trying to cut back on some of those, those variables and the cost that can go with those if we screw up that little high-priced ingredient. So premixes are a really good idea. We've really looked at in some of the lean management discussions of, where should we be mixing the feed on the farm, and maybe it's not a good idea for that payloader to be driving a long distance. And so moving that feed mixer to the locations, those maybe 3 areas on the farm to cut down on feed loss that's happening around that, wind loss, whatever can happen, and then just the time that it takes to fill up that wagon. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity there. We saw some really good pile pictures here today, but we also know farms that, as your one picture showed, that maybe have a little ways to go on how they handle their silage. So, and then feed management. Sounds like you guys are using feed tracking systems pretty good over here. So, but there's certainly that. So, awareness, acknowledging the opportunity. We think somebody has to be a champion for, it's just like any improvement that we're trying to make on the farm. If you're not constantly after it, whether it's milk quality, we were talking about milk quality today on the bus, and You know, Tom Harriman, who used to do the milker training in Michigan, said the difference between the low-quality milk and high-quality milk farms is how much time the manager is in the parlor. You have to be there. You got to be there on a regular basis. So champion that, commitment by the management and feeding team, and you know, the tools that we can use to make it work even better. But obviously nice printouts are good, but then we have to follow through and make adjustments and use those. So paying attention to the details. And that's what we have for you. There's Phil and I's information. We're more than happy if for follow-up. We like to build a relationship so that there's opportunities for us to continue conversations with you guys at a distance. We're more than happy to do that.
And I do want to acknowledge that many of these slides came from, he's one of our colleagues now, Don Martell. And so he has worked for Diamond V, but now works for MSU. And so I want to acknowledge his slides in the presentation.
Deming,
Thanks, guys.
Deming is the guy behind TQM, right?
What's that?
The guy
Yes.
Deming. He's
Yeah.
the guy, I remember, I think Peter Deming was the guy behind TQM.
Total quality management.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Well, Fear, what do we have next?
Next,